They called me homeless at the very dinner table I had paid for. They see a 62-year-old woman with nothing left but a few suitcases of clothes. They have no idea that in barely 30 minutes, the waiter is going to read a name on the deed to their new house, and that name is not my son's. If you have ever been pushed out of your own life, you need to hear this. My name is Eleanor Hart. At 62, with my silver hair pulled back into a severe knot and wearing a wool coat that had seen better decades. I knew exactly what I looked like sitting at the far end of the table. I was the relic, the charity case, the smudge on an otherwise pristine picture of suburban success. We were seated in the back of a high-end Italian restaurant just outside of Chicago, the kind of place where the pasta costs $30 a plate and the lighting is designed to make everyone look rich. The atmosphere was suffocatingly perfect. My son, Daniel, sat at the head of the table, looking handsome in the way men do when they have just signed a massive loan they cannot actually afford. His wife, Brooke, was glowing beside him, flanked by her parents and a few well-dressed cousins. Waiters glided past us like ghosts, their trays heavy with veal and expensive red wine. The sound of crystal glasses clinking against china filled the air, creating a symphony of wealth that drowned out the quiet humming of my own anxiety. To anyone looking over from the bar, we looked like a television commercial for the American dream. Then Brooke pulled out her phone. "You guys have to see the new shots," she announced, her voice pitching up an octave. She turned the screen outward, panning it around the table like she was bestowing a gift upon us, our dream home. Finally, homeowners. On the small screen, a photo glared back at me. It was a pristine, soulless structure in a new development, all sharp angles and minimalist landscaping. Standing in front of the heavy oak door were Daniel and Brooke, their arms wrapped around each other, laughing. There was no space in that frame for anyone else. I was not in the picture. It was as if I had been erased from the narrative of their lives before the boxes were even unpacked. "Oh, it is gorgeous." Brooke, one of her friends from the country club, cooed. Then the friend turned her gaze toward me. Her eyes were not kind. They were filled with that polite, predatory curiosity people reserve for train wrecks. "So, where is Daniel's mom moving to? Did she sell the old house? Who is she staying with now?" The clinking of silverware stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and wet. Every head at the table turned toward the end where I sat. I felt my skin prickle under their collective stare. I was no longer a guest. I was a detail they needed to tidy up. Brooke swirled the wine in her glass, watching the red liquid coat the crystal. She offered a small, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Oh, well, she is temporarily without a fixed address," Brooke said, letting the words hang in the air, kind of like upscale homeless. "Staying here a few weeks, there a few weeks." "Right. Eleanor." She emphasized the word homeless with a little giggle, as if it were a cute inside joke. A ripple of chuckles went around the table. The word hit me like a physical slap across the face. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made it hard to breathe. My hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, began to tremble. So I gripped the heavy linen napkin in my lap until my knuckles turned white. For a split second, the image of my cedar house by Lake Michigan, the home where I had birthed my son, the home I had saved from storms and debt, flashed in my mind. Then it vanished, replaced by the humiliating reality of this restaurant. I looked at Daniel. I waited for him to speak up. I waited for him to say that his mother was not homeless. that she was sacrificing everything for them. Daniel looked around the table, his eyes darting nervously. He cleared his throat. "Mom is free as a bird now," he joked, his voice sounding thin. "She is not tied down like us with a mortgage. Lucky her. He had sold me out. To keep the peace with his wife and her wealthy friends. He had turned my sacrifice into a punchline. I kept my face impassive. I took a slow sip of water. Inside my head, a different voice was speaking. They were right about the technicality. On paper. At this exact second. I did not have a house under my name, but not a single person at this table knew about the contract sitting in my purse. They did not know that 2 weeks ago. I had signed a document that would turn this celebration into their worst nightmare. I looked up from my glass and stared straight ahead. Have you ever been treated like a piece of discarded trash by your own child in front of strangers? It burns in a way that makes you cold all over. But to understand the devastation that is coming for them in 30 minutes, you have to understand what they took from me first. To understand why the word homeless cut me so deep, you have to know about the house they stole. It was not just a structure of wood and glass. It was a member of my family, perhaps the most loyal one I ever had. It was a 3-story cedar cabin perched right on the edge of a small, quiet lake just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was born there. I grew up there. And I intended to die there. My parents, the Fishers, were honest, hard-working people who smelled of sawdust and soil. They spent their entire lives scraping together every dollar to buy that plot of land. My father drove every nail into the frame with his own hands. I remember him sitting me down on the unfinished porch when I was a girl, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. "Keep this roof over your head, Ellie," he told me. His voice rough with exhaustion, but full of pride. "No matter what happens, you hold on to this deed. It is the only thing that is truly ours in this world." I took that to heart. When I married Thomas Hart, a local mechanic with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints, I made him promise to love the house as much as he loved me. For a few years, he did. We were young and foolish, spending our weekends staining the deck and fishing off the old wooden dock. Then came Daniel. He was born in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor on a humid July night, with the windows open to let in the breeze off the lake. I remember the midwife handing him to me, his skin red and squalling. I pressed him against my chest, feeling his tiny heart beat against mine, and I whispered a vow that I never broke. "You will always have a place to return to, Daniel," I whispered into his soft hair. "As long as I am here, you will never be lost. But promises do not pay the bills. When the economy tanked, Thomas lost his job at the plant. He started drinking cheap beer on the couch, while the roof developed a leak that dripped a steady, maddening rhythm into a bucket in the hallway. I took a job working the graveyard shift at a nursing home, changing bedpans and holding the hands of dying strangers. During the day, instead of sleeping, I climbed ladders to patch the shingles myself because we could not afford a contractor. It was not enough for Thomas. One rainy Tuesday, I came home to find his closet empty and a note on the kitchen counter. He had left for Detroit with a girl from the assembly line who was 20 years younger than me. "I am sorry. L." The note read. The ink smeared slightly. I cannot do the heavy lifting anymore. It is too much. I signed the divorce papers without a fight. In exchange, I kept the house and the crushing weight of the remaining mortgage. I became the sole guardian of our little kingdom. For the next 2 decades, I worked myself to the bone. I rented out the ground floor to summer tourists, scrubbing toilets and washing sheets until my hands were raw. I saved every penny to fix the banister, to upgrade the furnace, to keep the walls standing strong against the brutal Michigan winters. It was worth it, or so I thought. I have such vivid memories of Daniel growing up there. I can still see him wobbling down the dirt driveway on his first bicycle. His knees scraped, but his smile wide. I remember nights when the snow piled up 3 feet high against the door, and we would huddle under a quilt on the sofa, roasting marshmallows in the fireplace. "This is the best castle in the world. Mom," he used to say, his mouth sticky with sugar. I believed him. I believed that we were a team, fighting against the world to keep our sanctuary. I fought off the bank, the weather, and loneliness to keep that house for him. Years later, standing on the porch with my hair turned grey and the morning mist rolling off the water, I looked at the lake and felt a sense of peace. This house is all I have. I whispered to the empty air, and it is enough. I never imagined that the little boy who once called it his castle would grow up to be the man who invited the invaders in. I did not know that the danger was not the bank or the storms, but the son I had raised to be a prince in the kingdom I built for him. As Daniel grew taller, stretching into a lanky teenager with limbs that seemed too long for his body, the house seemed to shrink in his eyes. He stopped seeing the magic of the lake and started seeing the cracks in the siding. He was smart, whip smart, and he played basketball with a ferocity that told me he was practicing for an escape. I remember the day he brought a few friends home from the magnet school in the city. I heard them whispering in the driveway. "Dude, your house looks like that. Creepy cabin from a horror movie." One of the boys laughed. Daniel did not defend our home. He flushed a deep crimson and kicked at the dirt. That night, while I was washing dishes, he stood in the doorway, dribbling his basketball with an aggressive, rhythmic thud against the hardwood floor. "I am going to get out of this town. Mum," he said, not looking at me. "I do not want to live my whole life in this rotting old thing like you do." The words stung, settling in my chest like a heavy stone. But beneath the hurt, I felt a quiet, fierce pride. I wanted him to want more. I wanted him to soar past the tree line that had bounded my entire existence. So I worked harder. I picked up extra shifts at the nursing home, lifting patients twice my size until my back throbbed in a constant, dull rhythm. I stopped buying new clothes. I stopped going to the diner with friends. Every spare $5 bill went into a rusted tin box I kept hidden on top of the refrigerator. When the acceptance letter came from the university in Chicago for an economics degree, we cried in the kitchen. I emptied that tin box, counting out thousands of dollars in crumpled bills to help with his tuition. I remember standing at the bus station, wrapping my coat tight against the wind. Daniel hugged me, his eyes bright with the reflection of the city lights he was heading toward. "Just wait. Mum," he promised, squeezing my shoulder. "I am going to make it big. Then I will come back and fix this whole place up. It will be like a resort. You will see." I held on to that promise for years. But Chicago has a way of swallowing people whole and spitting them out different. During his college years, the visits became sparse. The phone calls grew shorter. I noticed a shift in his language. He stopped saying, "our house," and started calling it "that place." He would complain about the drafty windows or the distance to the nearest grocery store, comparing our sanctuary to the modern, climate-controlled apartments of his roommates. I saved one voicemail he left me during his junior year. Just a simple message checking in. I used to play it on speaker while I ate dinner alone at the kitchen table. Have you ever listened to an old recording of a voice you know? Just to remind yourself that you still matter to the person on the other end. It is a pathetic comfort. But it was all I had. When Daniel graduated and landed a job at a mid-sized real estate firm in the city, the transformation was complete. He stopped dressing in hoodies and started wearing tailored suits that cost more than my monthly heating bill. He came home for a weekend that first summer, but he did not look at the lake with wonder anymore. He looked at it with calculation. He walked around the property, tapping on the walls and taking photos with his phone. He talked about underutilized assets and capitalization rates, words that felt cold and foreign in our warm kitchen. You know, Mum, he said, staring out at the water. This lot has huge frontage. If you tore down the main structure, you could easily subdivide this into 3 parcels. The potential for pure profit is insane. I dropped the spatula I was holding. This is our home, Daniel, not a parcel. He laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. I am just dreaming. Mom, relax. But looking back, I know he was not dreaming. He was assessing. The final straw, the foreshadowing I chose to ignore, came during a quiet dinner a few months before he met Brooke. He pushed his peas around his plate and looked at me with an expression that masked itself as concern. Mom, he started, his voice casual. Have you ever thought about selling, moving into the city somewhere smaller, safer? Convenient for doctors. You are not getting any younger, and this place is a lot to handle. I brushed it off, pouring more gravy onto his potatoes. I did not realize then that his question was not born of concern for my safety. It was the first draft of a business plan, and I was the obstacle standing in the way of his profit margin. The first time Daniel mentioned her, his voice held a brightness I had not heard since he was a child, showing me a good report card. Mum, I am dating someone, he said over the phone. Her name is Brooke. She works in marketing for a luxury furniture chain in the city. You are going to love her. I wanted to be happy for him. Truly. I did. But somewhere deep in my gut, a small, cold knot tightened. It reminded me of the vague warnings my own mother used to give me about people who smiled too much with their teeth and too little with their eyes. When Brooke finally arrived at the lake house a month later, she looked less like a girlfriend and more like an appraiser. She stepped out of Daniel's car wearing a cream-colored wool dress that probably cost more than my car, paired with pristine leather boots that had never touched mud. A cloud of perfume followed her, something heavy with jasmine and expensive ambition. She walked up the old wooden steps of the porch, not like a guest, but like a model on a runway, her phone already out, snapping photos of the eaves, the doorframe, and the lake view. Mrs. Hart, she exclaimed, though her eyes did not stay on my face for more than 2 seconds. They were already sliding over my shoulder, inspecting the water-stained ceiling and the vintage windows. Oh my God. This house has just terrible potential, I mean. Insane potential. The compliment landed like a polite insult. I had prepared a nice dinner roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a simple garden salad. Brooke ate like a bird, pushing the potatoes around her plate while she filled the silence with architectural buzzwords. You know, if you just knocked down this load-bearing wall here, she said, waving her fork at the wall that held up the second floor. You could have a total open concept. And those wood slats, they have to go. We could replace this whole side with floor-to-ceiling glass. French windows would really open up the space. I looked at Daniel, expecting him to defend the home he grew up in, the home he used to call his castle. Instead, he was looking at Brooke with a glassy-eyed infatuation, nodding along to her demolition plans. "I told you," Daniel said, grinning. "If Brooke touches this place, it would go viral on Instagram in 24 hours. I noticed the shift immediately. It was no longer we, the family. It was we, the couple. After dinner, Brooke suggested she wanted to try a little experiment. She called it a sample room. Before I could object, she had commandeered my old sewing room, dragging furniture out into the hall, covering my floral wallpaper with temporary white adhesive sheets she brought from her trunk, and staging a few modern vases she had borrowed from her showroom. I stood in the doorway, watching my history being covered up by sterile white paper. Brooke stepped back to admire her work, then leaned in close to Daniel, keeping her voice low, though not low enough. "Babe, listen," she whispered. "If we move here full-time eventually, the second floor has to be the master suite for us, complete privacy. Your mum could maybe take the attic. Or, honestly, there is that really nice assisted living facility 5 miles down the road. It is way more fun for people her age." My breath hitched. I looked at Daniel. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. But he did not say no. He did not say never. "Brooke is just joking. Mom," he said when he saw me standing there, his laugh nervous and hollow. "She has a dark sense of humor." But I knew the difference between a joke and a plan. A joke does not come with blueprints. Later that night, after they had gone to bed, I sat on the porch scrolling through social media on my tablet. I found Brooke's profile. She had posted a selfie taken right there on my porch, the sunset reflecting in her oversized sunglasses. The caption read, "Finally relaxing. Weekend at our lake house." The word "our" was capitalized. It sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the evening wind. That 3-letter word was an act of colonization. She was not just dating my son. She was rewriting the deed to my life, one social media post at a time. And my son was handing her the pen. The ambush happened on a seemingly innocent Tuesday. Daniel and Brooke had invited me up to Chicago under the pretense of showing me their new apartment. But the car did not stop at a residential building. Instead, we pulled through the wrought iron gates of a place called Silver Meadows. It was a sprawling complex of beige stucco and manicured lawns that looked suspiciously like a resort where people went to wait for the end. "Surprise," Brooke chirped from the front seat, turning around with a smile that showed too many teeth. "We thought we would take a little tour, just for fun." They walked me through the facility like they were selling me a timeshare. There was a heated pool that smelled faintly of chlorine and despair, a yoga studio filled with women in matching tracksuits, and a dining hall where the food was portioned out in color-coded scoops. "Look at this." "Mom," Brooke said, linking her arm through mine, her grip tight. "You would never have to worry about shoveling snow again. No more leaky roofs. No more dangerous stairs. I just think this is the perfect place for you to, really enjoy your golden years." I pulled my arm away gently. I was not a person to them anymore. I was a problem to be solved, a logistical hurdle standing between them and their freedom. Daniel tried to press a glossy brochure into my hand. "They have a waiting list." "Mum." I put down a fully refundable deposit just to hold a spot. Sign here. It is just a formality, no commitment. I am not signing anything. Daniel, I said. My voice steady, despite the trembling in my knees. I have a home. When that direct approach failed, the psychological warfare began. Over the next few weeks, whenever they visited the lake house, little accidents started happening. A burner on the gas stove was left on, filling the kitchen with the smell of rotten eggs. I knew I had turned it off. But Brooke was the one who found it. Oh my God. Eleanor, she shrieked, rushing to open a window. You could have blown us all up, are you? Having trouble remembering things lately. Then the carpet on the stairs suddenly came loose. I tripped, barely catching myself on the banister. Brooke was there instantly, her phone out, snapping a picture of the loose tack. Later. I saw her texting it to Daniel. I could imagine the caption, "I am so terrified your mum is going to break a hip." Daniel started calling me every night. The conversations were no longer about my day. They were interrogations disguised as love. He sent me links to articles about elderly women falling downstairs and dying alone. "Mum, are you sure you are okay out there by yourself?" he would ask. His voice thick with performative worry. It is just... Isolation is dangerous. We worry. Then came the pitch. We were sitting in my living room, the fire crackling in the hearth. Brooke leaned forward, her eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Eleanor, why don't we just be practical?" she said softly. "Sell this place. The market is hot. You will walk away with a huge chunk of cash. We can pool it with our savings and buy a big, beautiful house in the suburbs of Chicago, a forever home. You would have your own suite on the ground floor, private, safe, and your name would still be on the deed, right alongside ours. Alongside ours." The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I remembered my father, sitting on this very floorboards 50 years ago, telling me never to let the title of this land leave my hands. "If you own the roof, nobody can make you leave," he had said. "I am not selling," I said. Brooke's face tightened, but she recovered quickly. Okay, we respect that. But at least let Daniel help you with the logistics. The bills, the property tax payments online. It is so complicated these days. Let's just add him to your bank account as a joint user, just for emergencies, just so he can help you manage the cash flow. I looked at my son. He looked tired, his eyes pleading. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe that, despite everything, he was still the boy I raised, and I was tired of fighting. Managing the online portals was getting difficult for me. "Fine," I said. "Just the bank account. To help with the bills." It was a small concession, a tiny crack in the dam. I signed the paperwork at the branch the next day, thinking I was accepting help. I did not know I was handing them the key to the vault. That weekend, after they left, I was tidying up the living room when I found a heavy catalogue Brooke had left on the coffee table. It was for high-end Italian furniture. I opened it to toss it in the recycling bin, but something caught my eye. On a page featuring a sleek, modern sectional sofa, there were handwritten notes in the margin in Brooke's distinctive script. Living room dimensions 20 by 15. She had written, "Wall removal cost $5,000. Those were the dimensions of my living room. She was not planning for a house in Chicago. She was already renovating my house in her head, waiting for the day I was gone. They had not given up. They were just waiting for the ink to dry on the bank forms. The envelope arrived on a bleak Tuesday morning in February, buried between a utility bill and a flyer for a grocery store. It was from a bank in Chicago I had never walked into. The subject line was standard enough to almost miss notice of interest rate adjustment on home equity line of credit. I frowned, my breath misting in the cold air of my kitchen. I did not have a home equity line of credit. I owned my house outright. The mortgage had been burned in the fireplace 10 years ago. I drove to the local branch of that bank in town, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The branch manager, a polite young man named Steve, pulled up the file on his computer. He looked confused. Well, Mrs. Hart, it says here the loan was originated 3 months ago, Steve said, turning the screen so I could see. $150,000 secured against the property at the lake address, co-signed by Daniel Hart. Print it, I said. Print everything. When he handed me the stack of warm paper, I felt the floor drop out from under me. There, at the bottom of the loan application, was my signature. Eleanor M. Hart. The loops were perfect. The slant was identical to how I signed checks. But then I saw it. On the power of attorney document attached to the back, my middle name was typed out as Marie. I spell my middle name Murray. No E. My mind flashed back to Christmas. Daniel had bought me a scanner as a gift. He had spent the whole afternoon helping me digitize my important documents, my old will, my insurance policies, the original deed. "Let me handle this for you, Mom," he had said, smiling that boyish smile. "It is important to have digital backups in the cloud." Choi, he had not been backing them up. He had been harvesting my signature. "Where did the money go?" I asked Steve. He tapped a few keys. "Disbursed to a joint account held by Daniel Hart and Brooke Mason. Then, looks like a series of large wire transfers. 20,000 to Lux Italian Furnishings, 80,000 to Chicago Title and Escrow." They had stripped the equity out of my home to pay for the furniture and the down payment on their new life. They had mortgaged my past to buy their future. I walked out to the parking lot and dialed Daniel's number. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "Hey, Mum. Busy day at the office. What is up?" "I am holding a letter from the bank. Daniel," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "About a loan I never signed." There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. "Oh," he said finally. "That. Yes, that. Look, Mom, I thought you agreed," he stammered, his voice shifting into a rehearsed pitch. "Brooke said this was the best way to unlock the value of the house. It is just dead equity sitting in old wood planks. We are helping you build a safety net." He was quoting the brochure. I could hear the marketing slogan in his voice. "You forged my signature. Daniel," I said. "That is a felony." I facilitated the paperwork." He snapped, his tone turning aggressive. "God, you are so stubborn. You do not understand modern finance at all. I had to take the lead because you refused to see reason. This is for the family's future. Why can you not just be grateful that we are handling things?" I hung up. My hand was shaking so badly I dropped the phone between the seats. I drove to the address listed on the notary stamp that had verified my fake signature. It was supposed to be a legal office in a strip mall 2 towns over. When I got there, I found a shipping store. The clerk told me that Lakeside Notary Services was just a rented mailbox. It was a ghost company, set up solely to rubber stamp lies. Someone had advised them on how to do this. This was not just greed. It was a conspiracy. I drove home in a daze. I stood on the back porch, staring out at the frozen grey sheet of Lake Michigan. The wind bit through my coat. For a moment, a terrible fatigue washed over me. I thought about how easy it would be to just let them win, to sell the house, pay off the loan, and drift away into that assisted living facility with the heated pool. I was tired of fighting. Then I remembered my mother. I remembered her crying at the kitchen table when I was 10, the day the sheriff came to evict us because she had co-signed a loan for her brother. She had lost our first home because she trusted family. Never again, I whispered to the ice. I went inside and locked the door. I did not turn on the overhead lights. I turned on the single, small lamp over the kitchen sink. I spread the bank letters, the forged documents, and the printouts of the wire transfers across the table. The sweet, accommodating grandmother who baked cookies and scanned old photos was gone. In the shadows of that kitchen, a new Eleanor Hart was born, and she was going to take back every single cent. The law office was squeezed between a bakery and a shoe repair shop in the center of town, a fitting place to fix a broken life. Karen Doyle was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of granite and then dressed in a sensible blazer. She was in her late 50s, with sharp eyes that had seen too many bank statements and not enough justice. She used to work for the big banks in Detroit, defending them, until she got sick of seeing people like me lose everything. Now, she was the only thing standing between the elderly of our county and the wolves in their own families. Karen listened to my story without interrupting, her pen scratching furiously against a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she stopped writing and looked me dead in the eye. "Mrs. Hart, let us be very clear about one thing," she said, her voice low and steady. "You are not homeless. You are the sole owner of a prime piece of real estate that is currently being held hostage. What your son and his wife have done is not just unkind. It is financial elder abuse, and it is illegal in ways they have not even calculated yet." I felt a lump form in my throat. Hearing a stranger validate my reality was overwhelming. Karen outlined the plan with the precision of a general. "First, we file a formal fraud affidavit with the bank. That triggers an internal investigation and freezes the line of credit immediately. Second, we file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Third, and this is the most important part, we create a shield. We are going to transfer the title of your home into an irrevocable trust." I hesitated. The word irrevocable sounded terrifyingly final, but if I put it in a trust, do I still own it? It feels like I am just handing it over to strangers again. Karen leaned forward, clasping her hands on the desk. "Eleanor, look at the alternative. You tried handing it to your son based on love and family loyalty. Look where that got you. Now, it is time to hand it over to the law. The trust protects the asset. It means no one, not Daniel, not Brooke, not even creditors can touch that house without going through a fortress of legal paperwork." She was right. I nodded slowly. "Now, for the strategy." Karen continued. "We need them to think they are winning. I want you to pack a bag and move in with your friend Rosa in Chicago. Let them think you are folding. Let them think you are weak and leaving the house empty for them to renovate. When people get arrogant, they get sloppy." She pulled out a file from her drawer and slid it across the desk. It was a case study of an 80-year-old man whose daughter had tried to sell his farm out from under him, using a forged power of attorney. "We saved his farm because he moved silently," Karen said. "He let them print the for sale flyers while we were busy locking down the deed. By the time they went to closing, they were selling a ghost." I understood then. This was not just a family squabble. It was a game of chess, and I had been playing checkers. For the next week, I became a spy in my own life. I downloaded a call recording app on my phone. Every time Daniel called to gaslight me about my memory or pressure me about the safety of the nursing home, I recorded it. I learned how to take screenshots. I went through Brooke's social media with a fine-toothed comb. I found a post from 2 days ago, a picture of her holding a paint swatch against my living room wall. The caption read, "So excited to finally update this rustic nightmare. Lake House is basically ours now. Demo day." I printed it out and added it to the binder Karen gave me. Then came the final piece of the puzzle. Karen contacted the Lakeshore Heritage Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to preserving historic homes in the region. She proposed a deal. If the legal battle got ugly, or if Daniel tried to contest the trust, I would donate the house to the foundation. In exchange, they would grant me a life estate. It meant I could live there until my last breath, rent-free. And the house would be preserved forever as a community landmark, never to be sold or subdivided. It is the ultimate poison pill, Karen explained. If Daniel tries to take the house, he finds out it belongs to a charity. He gets nothing. I sat in Karen's office on a rainy Thursday afternoon to sign the papers. The stack of documents was thick. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. I was signing away my ownership on paper to save my home in reality. They have no idea. Do they? I asked, looking at the signature line. No, Karen said, a small, grim smile playing on her lips. They think you are a confused old woman who is afraid of technology. They will not see this coming until it hits them in the face. I signed my name, Eleanor Mari Hart, spelling my middle name correctly this time. I looked at the ink drying on the page. They think I do not know anything, I said, my voice hardening. They will not see this punch coming until it hits them right at their dinner table. The next few months were a study in calculated silence. I moved into Rosa's apartment in Chicago, sleeping on a pull-out sofa that dug a metal bar into my lower back every night. It was a cramped one-bedroom unit, filled with the smell of Rosa's herbal teas and the constant hum of city traffic. But it was the perfect command center. On paper. I called the utility companies and suspended service at the lake house, citing major renovations. To the outside world, and specifically to my son, it looked like I had finally given up and abandoned the property. Daniel and Brooke came to help me move, which was really just a polite term for looting. I sat on a folding chair in the corner of my living room, watching them pack my life into boxes. Brooke was not just packing, she was performing. She had her phone set up on a tripod, recording a time-lapse video for her followers. "So," Brooke said to the camera, holding up my mother's antique ceramic pitcher with a feigned pout. "We are finally decluttering Grandma's old house. It is sad, but out with the old, in with the new." Right. I watched her toss the pitcher into a donation box with a careless thud. I did not flinch. I did not say a word. I let them strip the shelves bare. I needed them to feel like conquerors. I needed them to believe that the castle was theirs and the Queen was dead. A week later, during a lunch where Brooke insisted on paying with a credit card that I knew was linked to the stolen funds, she leaned over to Rosa while I was in the restroom. She did not know I had stopped just around the corner to listen. "Honestly, it is for the best," Brooke whispered, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Eleanor may as well be homeless now, but we will take good care of her. Once we get the new place, we will find her a nice spot, somewhere out of the way." I pulled out my small notebook and wrote that sentence down verbatim. Eleanor may as well be homeless now. It was not an insult anymore. It was fuel. Things began to tighten. Karen called me with the first piece of good news. The bank had completed its preliminary investigation into the fraud affidavit. They had flagged the notary stamp as suspicious and immediately froze the home equity line of credit. The tap is dry. Eleanor, Karen told me, they cannot draw another dime, but they do not know why yet. They just know the card is declined. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Daniel. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice tight with suppressed panic. "Quick question. Did you, by any chance, receive any weird mail from the bank lately? Maybe something about a security freeze? Or did you call them?" I put on my best senile grandmother voice, making it sound thin and confused. "Oh, Daniel. You know I do not understand all those papers. I just throw most of them in the bin. Why is something wrong?" No. Nothing is wrong," he said quickly. "Just banking glitches. Don't worry about it." He hung up, and I smiled at the phone. He was scrambling. While they were panicking about the frozen funds, I was securing my legacy. The Lakeshore Heritage Foundation formally accepted my proposal. They agreed to take ownership of the lake house into their trust, granting me a lifetime right of residency. In exchange, upon my death, the house would become a community center and local history museum. It would never be sold. It would never be subdivided. It would never be Brooke's project. But the final twist required one last act of theatre. Brooke was obsessed with a new development in the suburbs, a sprawling modern estate that she claimed was her destiny. She was pushing Daniel to close the deal, using the cash they had already drained from my house for the down payment, planning to refinance the rest later once they fixed the banking glitch. I went to see that same house. I walked through the open house on a rainy Tuesday, accompanied by the director of the Heritage Foundation. I wore a scarf over my head and dark glasses, looking like just another anonymous investor. I walked through the kitchen Brooke had posted about a dozen times. I touched the marble countertops she claimed were hers. The foundation was looking for a stable investment property to diversify their endowment portfolio, something to generate rental income for their charity work. I had convinced them that this specific property was undervalued and a perfect acquisition. "It is a solid build," the director whispered to me. "We can put in a cash offer. Sealed bid. No contingencies." I looked around the empty living room where Brooke imagined she would host her dinner parties. "Do it," I said softly. "Offer full asking price. I want to make sure the current prospective buyers lose out." That evening, staring out at the rain streaking Rosa's window, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Karen. "We have everything. The trap is set. The foundation's offer was accepted an hour ago. They think they are closing next week. They have no idea they are just clearing the path for us. Waiting for your signal to pull the pin." I texted back 2 words. "Dinner. Friday." They thought they were walking into a celebration of their new life. They did not know they were walking into an eviction. When the phone rang, Daniel's voice was vibrating with the kind of manic energy that usually precedes a crash. "Mom, we did it. We officially got the mortgage approval letter," he practically shouted into the receiver. "We sign the final papers next week. Brooke and I want to take you out to dinner tonight, a big celebration with her family. You have to come. I would not miss it for the world." "Daniel?" I said, my voice smooth and compliant. He exhaled, clearly relieved. He thought he had won. He thought my acceptance meant I had rolled over. that the banking glitch with the frozen credit line had been resolved, and that his mother was finally back in her box. I spent an hour getting ready in Rosa's cramped guest room. I did not dress for a celebration. I dressed for a role. I chose a grey wool cardigan that had started to pill at the elbows and a pair of sensible shoes that were scuffed at the toes. I scrubbed my face clean of makeup, letting the dark circles under my eyes stand out against my pale skin. I wanted to look exactly like what they thought I was, a defeated old woman with nothing left but her pride. Before I left, I knelt by the small fireproof safe I kept under the bed. I opened it and ran my fingers over the documents one last time. There was the certified copy of the irrevocable trust that now held the lake house. There was the court order temporarily freezing the home equity line of credit due to suspected fraud. And finally, the pièce de résistance, the purchase agreement for the new house in the suburbs, the house Daniel thought he was buying. The document clearly listed the buyer not as Daniel Hart, but as the Lakeshore Heritage Foundation, represented by their honorary patron, Eleanor Hart. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Karen. The bank representative will walk into the restaurant at 7:30 with the envelope. I will be at a table in the back. Let them play their hand. I closed the safe. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm, like a war drum. When I arrived at the restaurant, the air was thick with the smell of garlic and expensive perfume. Daniel and Brooke were holding court at a long table in the center of the room. Brooke's parents were there, along with a few cousins. Brooke was glowing, swiping through photos on her tablet, showing off the granite countertops and the vaulted ceilings of the dream home. And this will be the nursery eventually, she chirped, pointing to a sunlit room. It is perfect. I sat down at the end of the table, the ghost at the banquet. Brooke's mother, a woman who wore her diamonds like armor, leaned over and patted my hand with condescending pity. It is so wonderful that Daniel is taking such good care of you. Eleanor, she said, her voice loud enough for the table to hear. Not every son would shoulder the burden of an aging parent like this. You are very lucky. I forced a smile, swallowing the bile that rose in my throat. Yes, Daniel has certainly taken responsibility. They had no idea. They did not know that the burden had just secured their daughter's down payment with her own blood and sweat. Just before the appetizers arrived, Brooke clinked her spoon against her wine glass. I just want to make a toast, she said, standing up. She beamed at her parents, then at Daniel. To my amazing husband, for making this happen. To my parents, for their support. And to the bank, for finally believing in us. She did not look at me. She gestured vaguely in my direction. And, of course, to Eleanor, our temporary resident. We are happy to help you get back on your feet. That was when her friend, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, asked the question that started it all. So, where is Daniel's mom moving to? Did she sell the old house? And then came the line that Brooke delivered with a half smile and a sip of Pinot Noir. Ah, ba ai tam thoi, kong ko cho o ko jing, q, homeless sang chan ai ma, she said. Upscale, homeless. The table erupted in polite, cruel laughter. I sat there, clutching my napkin, letting the humiliation wash over me. I let them see my hands shake. I let them see the tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to feel powerful. I glanced up at the clock on the wall above the bar. The second hand swept past the 12. It was 7:28. I looked back at Daniel, who was laughing along with his wife, avoiding my gaze. I took a deep breath. Laugh now. My son? I thought. Because in exactly 2 minutes, you are going to be the one without a roof over your head. I sat up straighter. The waiter was approaching with the bread basket, but behind him, the front door of the restaurant was opening. A man in a dark suit was stepping out of the rain, clutching a leather portfolio. The show was about to begin. At exactly 7:30, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. A man in a sharp charcoal suit walked through the entrance, flanked by Karen Doyle. He did not wait to be seated. He whispered something to the hostess, who looked alarmed, and then he marched straight toward our table with the grim determination of an executioner. He stopped right behind Daniel's chair. "Mr. Hart, Mrs. Hart?" he asked, though it was not really a question. "I am sorry to interrupt your dinner, but there is an urgent matter regarding your mortgage application that needs to be clarified immediately." The chatter at the table died instantly. Brooke looked up, a piece of bruschetta halfway to her mouth, her expression souring. "Excuse me, we are in the middle of a family celebration," she snapped, flashing a dismissive smile. "We signed the approval papers days ago, whatever this is. It can wait until Monday." "I am afraid it cannot wait," the man said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Because as of 1 hour ago, the property you believe you are purchasing has changed ownership." He placed a thick manila envelope on the center of the table, right next to the wine bottle. He flipped open the cover page. It was a formal notice from the bank. The bold red stamp at the top read, "Denied," and underneath, in black block letters, was the reason: fraudulent documentation. "Your mortgage has been revoked," the man stated flatly. "Furthermore, the home equity line of credit associated with the property in Michigan has been permanently closed and flagged for criminal investigation due to a verified report of a forged notary seal. The names Daniel Hart and Brooke Mason have been added to our internal risk list." Daniel turned a shade of pale that I had never seen before. He looked at the paper, reading his own name next to the word fraud over and over again. Karen stepped forward then, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Mrs. Eleanor Hart has submitted a full dossier of evidence to the authorities. As of 2 weeks ago, she has been legally absolved of any liability for debts accrued under the forged signatures. You are on your own." Daniel looked from Karen to me, his eyes wide with panic. "Mum, what is—" "I do not understand." The man in the suit was not finished. He pulled a second document from his portfolio. "Regarding the house in the suburbs you intended to buy. Since your financing collapsed, the seller accepted a backup cash offer this afternoon." He slid the purchase agreement across the tablecloth. Brooke snatched it up, her hands trembling. Her eyes scanned the page until they landed on the line labeled Buyer. "Lakeshore Heritage Foundation," she whispered, her voice shaking. Then she saw the line underneath, represented by honorary patron Eleanor Hart. "No," Brooke screamed, standing up so abruptly her chair clattered backward. "No, that is impossible. We put down a deposit. We have rights. Your deposit has been frozen to cover the legal fees and penalties associated with the fraud investigation." The man replied calmly, "You have no rights to that property, and you have no money to reclaim it." I reached into my purse and pulled out my reading glasses. I took the final piece of paper from the envelope Karen handed me. It was the confirmation of the irrevocable trust for the lake house. "According to this deed," I said, reading the text aloud to the silent table, "the Lakeshore Heritage Foundation grants Eleanor Hart exclusive..." lifetime residency at the property on the lake. Any attempt to evict, sell, or alter the property without her consent will result in immediate legal action. I took off my glasses and looked at my son. The arrogance was gone. The calculation was gone. He looked like a child who had realized too late that the ice was too thin. "Mom," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Mom, how could you do this to me?" To us, I looked him dead in the eye. "I did not do this to you. Daniel, I did this to the people who tried to make me homeless at my own dinner table." At that exact moment, a waiter who had missed the entire drama approached the table, beaming. He was holding a chocolate cake with a sparkler sizzling on top. Written in icing on the plate were the words, "Congratulations, new homeowners." The irony hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Brooke let out a strangled sob, grabbed her purse, and ran out of the restaurant, shoving past the confused waiter. Daniel slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Her parents sat frozen, staring at their empty plates. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my old wool coat. I placed a $20 bill on the table for the waiter, who was still holding the sizzling cake. "Enjoy the dessert," I said softly. I walked out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. I did not look back. I did not wonder where they would sleep. I took a deep breath of the wind coming off the city, and for the first time in months, I felt the unmistakable warmth of having a home that no one could ever take away from me again. Whoa, that was a heavy one. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to hear my story today. I'd love to know where you are listening from, so drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how big our family really is. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, smash that like button, and hit the hype button so we can share these lessons with even more people. Stay safe out there.